waiting for me? Yeah, I'm here from Argentina. Well, and I'll share, we were out there, we're concerned about Charlie Farrar. He left to go get his license and he hasn't come back, so then he's out there trying to figure out who she's going to call and what to do. So we were going to come get you, Rick. Matter of fact, Rick, will you just go out there right now and take over from where I was conversing on that? Good morning. Good morning. Yes, and then another funny story. Danny came to me this morning and said, "Where are the Bell children?" So you all just sit on that for a second and then tell me how you interpreted that. Because I took off running and brought him over here and went back and forth, and then he said, "No, the actual Bell kids, children, Katie and Jackson." So yeah. So I welcome you all. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be here. I'm going to take a selfie in a minute because I've been with people that have been taking photos all week of Argentina. And, you know, that's great, but really my highlight was to come back and be with you guys. So I'm going to take that selfie and put it back up on the website too and say I'm glad to be home with my family. So a couple of things though that I did want to announce that I wrote on the side while I was traveling this week, because all the announcements are in here and Russ also wants to speak. But I wanted to also lift up Tammy Buckaloo. So her surgery didn't quite go as planned. So she's doing okay, but wasn't expected to be out as long as she's going to be out. So Danny, can you let us know? I was very sad to read about Howie Holmes, if you know, the pastor from Providence Bible. That was a huge loss for our community. And of course, Billy Graham, for that matter, was another loss. I'm lifting up Jimmy Lillard is home. And I can't ask you all enough to go visit the Lillards. Jimmy is in the middle of an amazing story. And any one of us can be a part of that story today. He found Christ before this whole accident happened, and it's been such a journey. And so I don't want y'all to miss out on it because it's a pretty amazing journey that he's on. So call him up and say you want to come visit and talk to him. And I'm lifting up Austin Queen. So he is another young man in our community that some of our families knew. And if you'll be, put your hearts and prayers behind the kids in our community as they've lost another classmate as well. The hunger offering is today, and so that's our second offering to help support things going on in the community, as well as we send off a small percentage to the Presbytery for food programs in the area. And with that, I will call Russ up because we are doing the warming shelter this week, and we start tonight.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Glory be to God. God bless us. Well, the warming shelter does start today. Once we're doing transport today, there will not be any showers. Powell Wellness Center has closed down their facility to redo it, and the showers are off the shelter. So Wednesday night, there's an offer plan to be at the tennis center at 8 p.m. to do showers Wednesday night. So those folks that signed up for Wednesday night, that'd be great to have you come by right before 8 p.m. We'll pick up the folks. It's going to be a little awkward, but I'm understanding it'll work. So for those who signed up, thank you very much for sitting on this night. The shelter, I was there last night. We had about a dozen guests there last night, okay? Now, typically, we've been doing this since 2009. There's a lot of people go to the shelter, and for some reason, Friday and Saturday, they take a time out and we don't come back in until Sunday. So right now, we're running about 18. So if people are providing dinners for the evenings, plan on 20. That would include, turkey chaperones. So head count is 20 for those who are doing dinners, okay? For those that I've missed or didn't have a chance to talk to, whatever, I will be at the end of the service, be out Northex here, next to Kovac. If you want to come see me and chat about participation or have questions about what time to be here or that, please do so at the end of the service. Please come out and say hello. Okay? All right, thank you very much for participating. Looking forward to having you all involved. Thank you.
And now take a moment to introduce yourselves to each other and say your hellos. minds for today's worship. I've already been told that it's a great one, by the way. Looking forward to it. We will bring our newly prepared wick into, and Charlie's here. Yay! We found him. All right.
So I go out and come back again.
Go ahead.
So before we move ahead in the service, let me just call your attention to something you probably noticed over the last few weekends. It will continue to happen. We don't use the same exact order of worship week in and week out. You probably noticed that. We move things around a little here and a little there. And there are several reasons why, one of which is we always want to craft the service in such a way that it suits whatever we're talking about for the morning. So, for example, typically you'll do a confession of sin and an assurance of pardon somewhere before the sermon in worship. Well, today it's not there, you'll notice, and that's because of something we're going to do after the sermon. If you ever have any question about why things are structured the way they are, just don't hesitate to ask. Hopefully there's always a reason behind the way things are done and the way things look weekend in and weekend out. I always invite your questions about that or anything. So let's start today with these words from Psalm 94. Would you direct your attention to the Lord? If the Lord had not been my help, my soul would soon have lived in the land of silence. When I walked with the sleeping, God steadfast love held me upright. When the anxieties of my heart are many, God's comfort cheers my soul. Or actually in your bulletin, you see the Lord's Prayer mentioned twice. We're actually going to save it for when we take the offering. Our opening prayer today is very simple. It's an ancient historical prayer from of old people, a set of fishermen. And perhaps as I pray this, you will find yourselves and what it says about life true of you this morning too. For our opening prayer, we simply read, Dear God, be good to us today, for the sea is large and our boats are small. Amen. Would you stand and let's sing? So often in our service here, when we affirm what Christians have believed about Christianity for its history, we use something called the Apostles' Creed, which goes a long way back to 150 AD. But today we're going to use something even older. There are about half a dozen cases in your New Testament, the second half of your Bible, where we have recorded for us, in mostly some of Paul's letters, the earliest Christian creeds or hymns about what Christians way back as early as 60 AD believed about the faith that we have in common with them. One of those very ancient first creeds is found in the passage that's in your Bible, in your bulletin. Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 to 20. So would you read with me these words that Paul put into Colossians that represent some of the oldest ways of expressing what Christians have always believed? With me, please. Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. In, for, and through him, all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible. He himself is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he may come to have first place in everything. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him God was delighted to reconcile all things back to himself, whether on earth or in heaven, by making peace through the blood of the cross. Would you stand and let's sing? So as you've heard me say before, one of the best places in a service like this to do the Lord's Prayer is right now, as we prepare to give God our offerings and our gifts. And that's because the Lord's Prayer teaches us that we are supposed to pray for our daily bread to be given. And the way the daily needs of this church are met is through your giving and your generosity. We are also taught to pray that God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven, and that His kingdom would come here on earth. The way that that happens through the work of our church, in part, is because you are generous to it. So, would you pray with me the prayer that Jesus taught us so long ago? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, heard at the outset of the service, the baskets are going to come around twice. Second time they come around will be the wood tins, and they are for the hunger offering that will go primarily to support needs within the life of our church or our community. kids and whoever is leading children's church, come on up. We kind of have to squeeze in today because I messed with the stage a little bit. So why don't you guys gather right here? There we go. Leave me a spot. I need more space than you guys do. All right, come right here, sweetheart. That works. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, okay? And they totally want to hear your answer, I assure you. Okay, here's the first question. Tell me some things that, well, you guys can come over here. Why don't you sit in front of me? That way I can see you. You got it? Okay. So I want you to tell me some things that you're afraid of. Not me. Somebody else, okay? Right? What are you afraid of? Anything.
Growing up at school.
Very specific. All right. You're not afraid of throwing up anywhere else, just in school. It is embarrassing. You're right, I agree. Okay? Somebody else. Wow, you guys are oddly specific. Dropping gummy bears on the floor. Other candy, not a problem. Gummy bears, however, a problem. Yes. You're afraid of sharks. Good, okay? Not a lot of sharks in Virginia. You're good? Okay? Snakes. I bet if you ask people, that would be one that a lot of people would share. Snakes. And you don't mean your brother, right? Just snakes in general. Yes?
Any type of bug.
Any type of bugs?
Other than butterflies, and
It'd be weird if butterflies freak you out, right? Yeah. Okay? What else?
you're scared of thunder.
Thunder. That's a very common one too. Okay. Now I have another question for you. I want you to think about the things that you're afraid of. What happens to you when you get afraid? Like, how does your body feel when you get afraid? How do you know that you're afraid? Okay? Yes? Do you throw up at school? When you get worried about throwing up at school, do you throw up at school? No? Okay.
You feel like you get butterflies in
Good. You're what? You're afraid of blackberries? Wow. Okay, that wins the most peculiar here, I think. Okay, yeah, you feel like you have butterflies in your stomach. Good. Somebody else, yes?
But you feel nervous.
You do feel nervous. Exactly right. Yes.
You turn pale and you start to sweat.
Right. You turn pale and you start to sweat. Exactly. Yes.
Whenever I see a bug, I run around in circles.
You run around in circles. I love it. Good job. Yes.
I scream.
You scream. Just, you know what? A lot of them do too when they get scared. They just wouldn't say that. Good job. Okay, so your parents today are going to be in here and we're going to be talking about fear. So when you, after children's church, when you guys are at lunch or whatever, why don't you ask them what they learned? Because they should be listening. Right? Okay. All right, you guys, what's that? What if they're not? You'll find out at lunch, won't you? Exactly, right. Okay, you guys head on out to children's church. Who's got them today? Yeah, okay, we're good. All right. Thank you guys. Good job.
Just give me back.
So, if this is your first Sunday with us, let me explain. If you're a regular here, you know this. We are talking right now about foundational subjects or ideas that are going to be important during this church's transition time. What's called in church circles, it's interim time. And we're going to talk about our fourth foundation stone today. To do that, let me ask you a question. So, if you were to take the four Gospels in your Bible, these are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are the four books in your New Testament that talk about Jesus and his life and his ministry. What do you think they talk about the most? What subjects does Jesus talk about the most? Unlike them, you don't have to raise your hand and answer. This isn't a quiz or anything. One of the common answers to that question is, well, Jesus talks a lot about faith and its opposite, unbelief. And that's true, he does. Another common answer to that question is that Jesus talks about money and possessions a lot. And that is also true. And Jesus talks about money and possessions way more than we do in church. That's true. But one of the other subjects that comes up all the time in the Gospels, far more than you might at first realize, is what we're going to talk about today. Let me give you 3 examples of this, but if you'd like to do a little Bible reading of your own this week, on the top of the sermon notes page in your bulletin is a list of passages in the Gospels that touch on the subject we're going to cover today. So you can go way further in this than I'm about to. I'm just going to give you 3 examples. Here's example number 1. This is from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 6, from what we call the Sermon on the Mount. It's a 3-chapter sermon that Jesus teaches. Verses 25 and 26, Jesus speaking. Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, or about your body and what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and your body more than your clothing? So apparently, in this first instance, Jesus is telling us that human beings, you and I, tend to be anxious about our physical needs. Or what we're going to eat, how we're going to pay the rent, how we're going to keep food on the table for those teenagers that are ravenous and insatiable under our roofs, right? And according to Jesus, apparently, what anxiety can do to you when you're really focused on that stuff is it pulls your attention away from the really important things in life. It's things like relationships and your own well-being and your spirituality and your relationship with Him. Anxiety has the power to do that when you're worried about physical or concrete things. Here's the second example. This is 4 chapters later in the same gospel. Matthew chapter 10, verse 28, again Jesus speaking. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear God who can destroy both the body and the soul in hell. Well, that's Jesus being very candid and very blunt. But Jesus' point appears to be, you and I, as followers of Jesus, can sometimes get very anxious or afraid about the cost of following Him. When we make decisions that are based on our Christian values, or that represent our Christian priorities, or we behave in a way that is distinctly Christian, sometimes as the disciples of Jesus, we can get very scared of how much that's going to cost us. That seems to be what Jesus is saying. Now here's the last example, and it's my favorite. This is from Luke chapter 8, verse 37. Now before I read it, I have to tell you the backstory to this. So there's a very famous story in the Gospels where Jesus goes to a region in northern Israel called Gerizim. And he runs across somebody who has, according to the Gospels, been demon-possessed for a long time. And Jesus frees this person of that demon, and the demon, incidentally, leaves the person, goes into a herd of pigs, and the herd of pigs goes flying off a cliff, and they die in the Sea of Galilee. So this remarkable miracle, this supernatural event happens. A person is freed from what the Gospels call demon possession and is transformed. What do you think the reaction would be of those who observed it? Well, verse 37 of Luke 8 is going to tell you. Then all the people of the surrounding country who had observed this miracle asked Jesus to leave, for they were seized with great anxiety. Did you guess that? Wouldn't you and I think, no, we would glorify Jesus, we would honor Jesus, we would exalt Jesus for seeing this positive, supernatural event happen. And what did they do? Well, because it was so shocking and so surprising, so out of their norm, though it was very positive, they were so anxious about it, they asked him to leave. We don't know what to do with you. You're so far out of our categories, we don't know. We just want you to leave. And there should be a part of you that says, yeah, that kind of is human nature, isn't it? And I can even see myself in that. So what we're going to talk about today is the subject of anxiety. And what I'm going to do is I want to walk through pretty quickly that box in the middle of the page on your sermon notes page in your bulletin. And my promise is that today is really more introductory to this subject, And maybe down the road we'll dive in a little deeper and talk about it more in depth. But it's a crucial subject, not just for you as a human being or as a follower of Jesus to understand, because it is a very real issue in your life that shapes and molds you for the better or for worse. But it's also important for your church right now. Because we can admit it, some of you might be feeling anxious about the life of their church. A beloved pastor who left so well and with whom you have such years and decades together. You wonder what's next. Or you're anxious about the future of your church as you look around at the ages of most of the people here. So anxiety is real for you right now in the life of your church. So we need to talk about it. So here are 4 things, just by way of introduction this morning, I want to tell you about anxiety, both from the pages of Scripture and also from modern science and what it teaches you about anxiety. Number 1, there are 2 independent parts of your brain, your lower brain and your limbic system. You don't have to remember that. 2 parts of your brain that are reactive. They don't think. They just react to things. They tend to be really emotional, and they tend to create anxiety in us. You can't really control them a whole lot. Every single person in the room has these 2 parts of their brain. There are no exceptions. So the person you think deals with anxiety the least that you know in your life still has these 2 parts of their brain. And every time they run into something that's surprising or doesn't fit their expectations or that's negative or even just strongly emotional, every time they run into that, these 2 parts of their brain are triggered. So you heard the kids, right? I asked them, what are they scared of? And one of them said, I'm scared of dropping gummy bears on the floor. So you can imagine, right? Mom wants to be nice to her son, gets him gummy bears for a treat. And he's trying to hold too many of them in his hand at once, picks up too many, and no, one is falling out of his hand. What happens to his brain? Instantly, he's scared. Instantly, he's anxious as he watches the dreaded gummy bear fall out of his hand upon the dreaded floor. He doesn't get to choose that. His brain just reacts that way. And yours is the same way too. Which is why what happens to you is not nearly as important in life as how you react to it. Because your brain's going to trigger anxiety and fear and anger just all on its own. So that's number 1. No one is exempt. Number 2, what's anxiety look like for you? Do you know? Because it doesn't just look like worry. Now, there are some of you in the room who get A+ in the sport of worry. I understand. But there are others of you in the room for whom, when these reactive parts of your brain kick in, it's called anxiety, it looks very different. Do you know someone who's hot-tempered? No, if you're doing this to each other. Do you know anyone who's hot-tempered? Temper is a function of these parts of your brain that go like this. And so you lash out in anger at the thing that's surprising, or the thing that's negative, or the thing you don't like that came out of the blue. Yeah, it's all a function of this part of your brain that doesn't think, it just reacts. And there are all kinds of ways that anxiety shows up. Do you know anybody who's controlling? And their reaction to a surprise or a situation that they walk into that they think is out of hand, they want to try to control it and direct it. Yeah, you know what that is? It's anxiety. And it's their anxious response, their unconscious response to that situation. Now here's the thing. If you can't identify from that list I have in your sermon notes page what your way of dealing with anxiety is, ask your spouse, because they know. Ask your kids, because they know. There is no one in the room who doesn't have, on occasion, a negative, habitual way of responding to surprises or changes or negative things that happen out of the blue. You need to know yours. And even if you look like, on the surface, the least anxious person in the world, It's still true of you. I fool my kids. You can ask them. My 2 kids are here this morning. They think I'm the least anxious person they've ever met. Yeah, but now they know what to look for. Dad's anxiety doesn't look like worry or anger. Dad's anxiety looks like I talk a lot less and disengage. Dad's anxiety looks like I fret and can't sleep at night. That's what it looks like for me. Do you know what it looks like for you? Here's the thing. As one expert, modern expert in anxiety says, you need to be able to know this about yourself, because the surest way for your anxiety to be unresolved is for you to go on denying it. If you want to live in a world where you are the only unanxious person in the room, knock yourself out. But you're guaranteeing yourself that you're never going to dethrone it or get the upper hand on it. This morning, we need to be willing to say that one of the first steps for us to not live an anxious or fearful or reactive life is we are going to name what those things are that make us that way. Third, here's what happens when these 2 parts of the brain kick in. When you're surprised, or when something happens that you don't expect, or something doesn't conform to what's normal or typical in your life, here's what immediately happens when these 2 parts of the brain kick in. You stop thinking about today or the present, and you start thinking about either yesterday in the past or tomorrow in the future. So it becomes not about what, but when. And if you're tracking with me, you're thinking, okay, yeah, how is it that I experience anxiety? What's that look like for me? I'll bet you've gone through something like this. Two examples, one of each, past and future. So have you ever had the experience, say at work, where you've got a coworker or a boss that has a personality that just rubs you wrong? Like maybe they're real outspoken, they don't have a filter, right? Whatever it is that comes into their mind, they just say. And man, there is something about that person. All they got to do is walk in the room and your skin crawls. You know what that is? It's probably because somebody in your past behaved to you that way and you were negatively impacted by it. And that little memory wrote itself into your brain so that now whenever it is that you encounter somebody with that same personality that impacted you in a negative way, those memories kick in and you're pulled to the past. And now you're no longer treating them based on whatever it is they're saying today. Maybe they're on their best behavior today and they deserve to be treated well. Nope. You're treating them based on your past experience of somebody like them. You're not dealing with today at all. Future works the same way. Khalil Gibran, the great author, says it this way: anxiety comes from us not thinking about the future, but trying to control it. Much of what causes you and I anxiety is we are thinking down the road to next month, next week, next year, our retirement, putting our kids through college, and we are trying not just to think about it, but control its outcome. And that is beyond our grasp as human beings. There is only one person you know of who can live in past, present, and future, and his name is God Almighty, and it ain't you, and it ain't me. Right? So, this is real for me. One of the things, right, I told you I'm a fretter. So like my sleep pattern goes down when I get anxious. I stay up a little bit at night. I don't sleep as well as I should, and I just kind of mull things over in my mind. And for me, a lot of times, it's not my past that does it, it's the future, right? And you can see this. I'm an interim pastor. Guess what that means? It means if you don't like me, don't worry. I'm temporary, right? But that also means then, that wife that I love, those kids that I love, sometime soon, I don't know when, I'm going to be looking for more work, for different work. I wonder if I'll find it. I wonder how I'm going to pay my bills. I wonder how I'm going to put my daughter through college in 2 years. And all of a sudden, when my train of thought starts running down that track, I am no longer in today. I am in tomorrow. I am no longer in the present. I'm in the future, dealing with things that I cannot control. sure enough, you need to watch. Whether you're an angry, anxious person, or a detached, anxious person, or a worrying, anxious person, if you watch, what your anxiety is doing is pushing you either into the past or the future. And it's making you not focus on the only thing you really have, which is today. It's also true for your church. I don't want you to be thinking about yesterday. I don't want you to be thinking about what your church was, though we will cherish that. I don't want you to be worried about what your church is going to be 5 years from now or 10 years from now, or even what we're going to be doing in this transitional process 3 months from now. You know what I want you to be doing? Be with me today. Let's take this step today. Then when tomorrow becomes today, we're going to do the same thing together. And we're going to make our way through this one day after another, one today at a time. Now, last thing in that box. This is particularly true of things that happen between people that make us anxious. You need to be aware of this, okay? You need to be aware that what happens when you get anxious about something going on between you and another person, you lose sight of what you're responsible for and what they're responsible for. One of the experts in this field will say it this way: you lose sight of where you end and others begin. So I'm sure you've had the kind of conversation where a friend of yours says, hey, can we get together for coffee? Can I come over to the house? And they sit down with you and they say, you just got to know that you really hurt my feelings. And I'm really disappointed in you. And man, I didn't think that you were that kind of person. And yeah, I don't know what this is going to do to our friendship. I mean, I'm really having second thoughts about it. And if you haven't had that kind of conversation, it's just because people haven't probably taken the initiative to do that with you. But hurt between people is a pretty common thing, right? And I assure you, most pastors live in this world. We have conversations like that all the time with people. So in that moment, this person that you have some kind of attachment to, they come and tell you that, you feel the anxious impulses in your brain kick in. You're either worried, or you're defensive, or you're angry, or you just want to shut down and not say anything. And all of a sudden, your vocabulary gets limited to about 3 words. Sure, Right? But that's all because of these reactive parts of your brain. But one of the things in that moment you have to keep sight of is, what's your responsibility and what's theirs? Where do you end and where do they begin? Is making them happy your responsibility? No, it is not. Their happiness is their responsibility, right? How they heard what you said that hurt their feelings so, whose responsibility is that? It's theirs. But what's yours? Maybe how you said it. Maybe that you were a little more inarticulate than you should have been. Maybe you didn't think about how this particular person, given their backstory, would have heard what you said, right? Yeah, it is your responsibility. You do need to take ownership of that. Absolutely. Can you keep them your friend? That doesn't seem like your responsibility either. If they're so mad at you and will not listen to what it is you have to say, and they're going to stop being your friend, that is solely their responsibility, not yours. And you can still love them and pray for them, but you cannot be led to believe that it is on you to maintain their friendship with you. You see how it works? During this time in the life of your church, you're going to hear things like that. You're going to hear things from people who they're scared, or you know what, they don't know that they're going to stay a part of the life of this church because they just don't like the nerves and the unknown of the in-between time. Well, is it your responsibility to keep them in the life of your church? No, it's theirs, right? But what can you do? You can reach out to them, listen to them, have a conversation with them, direct them to me, so that I can do the same. But be sure to keep a clear eye on what is your responsibility and what's theirs. Where do you end and where do they start? Because between people, the single greatest source of anxiety is blurring those lines or forgetting that they exist. Now, what we need to do today is we need to put some feet to this. We need to do something about this. It's great that you've been very attentive for 15 minutes and listened to me talk about it, but we need to do this. So, on your seats today, there's a little half slip of paper. And we are going to put into practice this very well-known verse from 1 Peter chapter 5. It is verse 7. And we are very consciously today going to name and take off our anxieties, and we are going to give them to God. So the first thing that I need you to do is in the quiet while Cheryl plays, in the next 60 seconds, I want you on this piece of paper to write down a few things in your life that are making you anxious. These are things in your life that today are making you tense or stressed or worried or angry or frustrated. I want to know what they are. No one's ever going to see this sheet of paper but you and God. I want you to write those down. Then as you do that, write down a few of those things that come to mind. Then I want you to move on, and maybe if there's something about your church that you're concerned about, especially here on the front end of Wayne retiring and not knowing what's next, I'd like you to write those anxieties down too. Things that worry you or concern you. I'd like you to name those. Because if you're not willing to name those, then we're not going to see those things be healed. We're not going to be able to move past them. So take a minute in the quiet and do that, then I'm going to tell you what to do next. Take about 15 more seconds. You can do two things at once. You can keep writing while I talk. So now we're going to put some motion to this. You've used a pen and written it down, but now we're going to use our legs. This is our anxiety bucket. But actually, that's a poor way to say it. This is God's anxiety bucket. You carry your anxieties in here with you. I don't want you to carry them out. So instead what we're going to do is cast our anxieties into God's bucket. The 8:30 service already has theirs in here. And as I said, no one's ever going to see the content of this bucket. It's going back to Manassas with me. I'm going to let my son use a blowtorch on them. You're safe. Okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to come forward, row by row. And I want you to put your anxieties into God's bucket, and I want you to let them go. Because as Peter says, God cares for you that much. And he wants you to name your anxieties to him. As you do, as you come forward, you can even whisper the words of that very famous verse to yourself or to those who are in line with you. So why don't we start with the first few rows, choir. You can just come whenever you want to. Bring your anxieties to God and let them go so he can take them. So as I mentioned at the start of the service, right, we didn't do a confession of sin before the sermon. Now you know why. What we just did was a getting honest about our anxieties after the sermon. To conclude that, would you drop your attention down to your bulletin? I want you to read with me, pray with me, this prayer that comes to us from a Christian writer of the 20th century, a man named Frank Coppel. Let's make his words our words as we pray together today. Lord, why do we anticipate the worst when time and again the worst does not happen? Help us overcome our fears, calm our minds. Help us rest in you, and let your comforting spirit fill us with peace. Amen. Would you stand and let's sing one last time? Somebody forgot your gloves out in the narthex. I'm going to leave them up here. You can just come get them if they're yours, or if nobody claims them, have a free set of gloves with somebody. I want to leave you today on this Sunday where we have talked openly and honestly about how anxiety affects us and what it will take for us to overcome those anxieties that plague us with these words that come from Isaiah the prophet, chapter 41, verse 10. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot.
We're getting there. You keep going.
Okay. Well, at some point, the candles will go out behind me. But Isaiah 41, verse 10. Do not fear, for God is with you. Do not be afraid, for he is committed to you. God will strengthen and help you. He will uphold you with his victorious right hand. There we go.